Now I see it's my turn to guest in the old witch's mad mag. And naturally I am given the last spot. They're all jealous because my stories are always the most horrible. Well, they're right, and this time I outdo myself. Come into the Crypt of Terror. I am your host, the Crypt Keeper. Since you're all eager, I'll waste no time in beginning the blood-curdling tale I call The Gorilla's Paw. Floyd stood outside the curio shop window, gazing in at the weird assortment of objects that crowded every available inch of display space. As his eyes moved from one article to the next, Floyd began to feel uneasy. It wasn't that the curios were frightening. Floyd could not understand it. Then he looked up. Behind the window display stood the shopkeeper, staring at him with small, wrinkled, beady eyes. What's that old buzzard gawking at me for? Do I look like I'd be crazy enough to buy some of the junk? He's motioning for me to come in? At first, Floyd was tempted to turn away, but the look on the old shopkeeper's face was one of grim concern, so he shrugged and entered the shop. As he opened the door, a bell tinkled somewhere in the rear. "Did you want me for something, mister? Come in, young man. Come in." The foul odor of staleness and dusty decay seared Floyd's nostrils. He looked about the dark interior of the shop. "Listen, mister, I'm not in the market for any of this, but I have something I think you'll want." The old man lifted a strong wooden box from a drawer and placed it on the counter. Floyd turned to go. "Not me, old-timer. I can think of a lot of better ways to spend my dough. Wait, just look at it, that's all I ask." The shopkeeper took a key from his pocket and unlocked the small oak chest. He lifted back the lid. "Good Lord, what in blazes is that disgusting thing?" "It's a mummified gorilla's paw, my friend. A rare specimen. I'll sell it cheap." Floyd shuddered as he studied the black-skinned, hairy paw. He turned to the shopkeeper and burst out laughing. "And what in the world would I want with an ugly gorilla paw?" "That's up to you. If you want to buy it, it's $25. Without the chest, that's extra." Floyd shook his head and started for the door. $25 for that monstrosity? Not me, old man. Find yourself another sucker. I wish you'd buy it. Floyd stopped in his tracks at the old man's words. He stared down at the mummified gorilla paw. A strange feeling came over him. He lifted the dried extremity from the box and studied it. There was something about it that fascinated him. "Then, you'll take it?" Yes, I'll take it. I like it." Floyd paid the old man the $25 and pocketed the mummified paw. Then he left the shop. Soon he arrived at the run-down tenement where he lived. Once in his room, he flung the paw on the burrow and cursed. "I must have been crazy. I don't know what got into me. $25 for that horrible thing? Why did I do it? I wish I hadn't bought it." Floyd undressed, turned out the light, and went to bed. During the night, he was awakened by a scratching sound, but, thinking it was a cat, turned over and fell back to sleep. The next morning when he awoke, what the gorilla paw? It's covered by something. It looks like money? Floyd rushed to the burrow, lifted the crisp bills from the hairy paw and counted them. There's $25 here. Floyd stared at the money and then at the mummified limbs. He scratched his head. Cripes, I didn't put this dough here. I wonder where. Later that day, Floyd met his two best friends outside their favorite hangout, the pool room. Floyd didn't mention a word about his latest purchase, for fear of being ribbed. "Hey Eddie, I'm hungry." "How about you, Floyd?" "Nah, not me, Joe." "Me neither, Joe." Joe, Floyd's hungry friend, spied an umbrella-covered push cart approaching. "Oh boy, look, hot dogs. I'm gonna get me a couple." "Not from that guy, Joe. That's junk he sells. You'll get sick." But Joe didn't heed Floyd's warning. When his hunger had subsided, he had devoured 4 hot dogs of questionable quality from the push cart. Soon, however, "Oh, I don't feel so hot. Them dogs didn't agree with me. My stomach. You see, you wouldn't listen to me. I told you they were junk. I wish you didn't have a stomach. Then you wouldn't be hungry all the time." Later that night, Floyd returned to his room. He looked about. Something was different. Then he realized what it was. The gorilla paw. It's gone. Somebody swiped it. Floyd undressed and got into bed. There certainly are some strange things happening here. First I get my $25 back, then the paw's stolen. What do I care? I didn't like the ugly thing anyway. But the next morning, when Floyd awoke, well, I'll be. That blasted gorilla paw is back on the bureau. Floyd picked up the mummified limb and turned it over and over, examining it. Whoever swiped this thing got it all dirty. It's covered with muddy stains. It looks as though... Floyd, open up, quick, it's Eddie. Floyd slipped the stained paw into the top drawer of the bureau and opened the door. Eddie stood there breathless. What's up, Eddie? You're white as a sheet. Floyd, Joe's dead. They found him in his room. It was horrible. What happened to him, Eddie? Tell me. I seen him. It was like he was attacked by an animal. His belly was ripped open and his guts. Floyd suddenly coughed and hurried to the lavatory. Floyd leaned towards the bureau, his eyes wide with horror. He opened the top drawer and stared at the stained gorilla paw. Freddy, you remember yesterday when I wished Joe didn't have a stomach, so he wouldn't be hungry anymore? That night, Floyd put the mummified gorilla paw in his pocket and went downtown to the curio shop. When he entered, a dark, tall man greeted him. Yes, sir. What can I do for you this evening? Where's the old man? I want to see him. The tall, dark one's face fell. He shook his head sadly. You mean the man who used to own this shop? He's dead. Choked to death. 2 nights ago, some petty thief murdered him for $25. Did you say murdered? For $25? Floyd was trembling as he left the curio shop. He moved down the deserted street, musing to himself. Those stains on the gorilla paw. They're blood stains. Joe's blood. The thing is... Don't move, buddy. This is a gun in my hands. I've got a couple of bucks on me, mister. You can have 'em, only don't shoot. Hand over the wristwatch you're wearing. That looks like it's worth something. The hold-up man snatched Floyd's watch and the money and fled. Blasted. I don't mind the dough, but I wish he hadn't taken my watch. Good Lord. Floyd reached into his pocket. The gorilla paw, it's gone. The next morning, when Floyd awoke, the gorilla paw lay on its usual place on the bureau, and beside the stiff, hairy limb was the watch. It brought back my watch, and it's covered with blood. Floyd stared at the mummified limb. It must be. The paw does whatever I wish. I remember now. I wished I hadn't bought the ugly thing, so it brought back the $25 I spent on it. Then poor Joe. And last night I wished the crook hadn't stolen my watch. Now the watch is back. The paw, it's alive. It answered my wishes. I've got to test it to see. Let me think. I wish that radio was turned on. That's what I wish. Suddenly, as Floyd watched, the mummified gorilla paw grew limp. A finger twitched, then another. It began to move, slowly, painfully, toward the edge of the bureau. As it slid along, crawling by use of its wrinkled fingers, it made a scratching sound. That sound I heard, the scratching noise that awakened me that first night. A paw slipped off the edge of the bureau and fell to the floor. Then it began to move, dragging itself along toward the table with the radio on it. Floyd stared at the crawling thing, horrified. Suddenly he couldn't stand it anymore. He screamed at it. Stop! I wish you to stop! The hand continued on the table leg. It began to climb up, awkwardly. Finally, it reached the tabletop. Stop, I said. I wish you to stop. Oh Lord, it won't listen to me. It's doing what I first wished. The radio blared on. The hand stiffened. Then Floyd realized that a news broadcast was in progress. The newscaster's voice froze Floyd's blood. A small-time hold-up man was found this morning in an alleyway. His hand had been savagely ripped off at the wrist. The coroner's report says the hoodlum died of fright, not loss of blood. Police today have begun. My watch. The band is still buckled and closed. Floyd rushed to the phone. He dialed the pool room. Let me speak to Eddie. Quick. Hello, Eddie? This is Floyd. Listen, and listen carefully. Floyd told Eddie the whole story, and that paw does whatever I wish. What should I do, Ed? Should I tell the cops? What? Don't be a fool, Floyd. If it's true, you're set. Why, you could wish for dough. Plenty of dough. 10 grand. You can be rich. You'd be crazy to go to the cops. Gee, you're right, Eddie. I never would have thought of that. I'm a dope. I wish I had your brains. Floyd hung up and turned to the paw. Good God, it's gone, again. Why? That night, as Floyd cursed himself for losing the paw, a scratching sound came from his door. He flung it open. It's the gorilla's paw. It's dragging his sack. What in the world could it be? Floyd bent and opened the sack. He peered in. A violent nausea swept over him. It looks like brains. Ah! Suddenly, Floyd felt the gorilla paw spring to his back and work its way up to his neck. The last thing Floyd remembered before everything went black was the excruciating pain in his head, as though his skull were being crushed. The end.